Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Fallout 76 video. So we are on to the last part of the update now, going through the patch notes for the perk card changes today, and there is the whole bit at the bottom which is the bug fixes and stuff. But to be honest, I'm getting to the stage now where I'm done with dealing with this. It's boring me to tears, and I want to get this done. So I'm going to leave that bit off. As always, links in below if you want to check out the patch notes, and of course it's all on the Fallout website. So yeah, if you want to go through that stuff, by all means. But I'm getting tired of this crap. So, perk card changes. Not quite as boring as the weapon changes were. Definitely not quite as bad on the accountants and serial killers school of thought, but definitely still moving in that direction, which is a little sad and depressing. Yeah, continuing, there's a couple of kind of overarching themes here in the perk cards that I'm getting, or in this specific set of perk card changes. Incidentally, this should be the last major overhaul. At least going forward, there'll be little bits here and there, but nothing quite as substantial. So at least your build might be stable going forward. But yeah, there's a couple of things here that are particularly... I'm getting the vibe on this anyway. Obviously, there's the continuation to making it way too easy. There's an element of having multiple builds. The idea is that not every build suits every situation, and you might have a different big boss killing build, or end game content running build versus the general... moving around the game world, your daily driver kind of build. So it's kind of leaning into a sense of having different loadouts for that. Definitely getting that vibe, which I kind of have mixed feelings on, but I do kind of like, I think, just because, especially in the end game, more variety is a good thing. It's nowhere near enough to change the fact that combat is so awfully easy that it's barely worth engaging with. The whole point of it is to provide a challenge to be overcome, and it doesn't do that anymore, so you might as well rip the whole system out of the game at that point and have it just automated. Anyway, before I get into yet another rant about this stuff, let's have a look at how these perk cards are actually changing, because there is some fairly big deal stuff in here, and you will need to review your build, hopefully, for the last major time for a while. So, perk card changes. In this update, we're finishing our rebalancing of weapon perks that include heavy, melee, thrown, and bow weapons. Yep, fairly well summarized. At a high level, the perk changes touch heavy gunner perks being replaced with perks that focus on spending ammo in order to gain bonuses, and a highly requested perk to decrease spin-up time on weapons. So yeah, this is very much making your heavy guns most effective against either massive groups of enemies, or in particular, large enemies with one single big health pool, so it takes a long time to take them down. Yeah. But outside of that, for run and gun, you're definitely not going to get the most out of your heavy gun build. That said, you probably don't need to. In fact, you certainly don't need to. But, it probably does feel less good, so you might want a second build for that. And I think that adds some variety, so yeah. Melee perks are moving away from one-hand and two-handed designations, and instead they're going to be more generalized. And they'll also focus on sort of secondary additions to your weapons, such as bleed and power attacks and stuff like that. And I've got to admit, I don't like this. I feel like it's kind of shoehorning you, if you're a melee player, into one particular thing over others. It doesn't feel particularly good, although I might have to review that in my own time, assuming I can actually work up the wheel, because playing anything that isn't camp building at the moment is roughly in the paint drying category at the moment. I was going to go with the teeth pulling, that kind of level of fun, but having your teeth pulled has some drama to it, and this really doesn't anymore. Anyway, moving on. Bow perks are getting a change overall, so they will also benefit thrown melee weapons as well. And they target taking out large groups rather than just individual enemies in new ways. But you do really need to review these perks from what I'm hearing, because they do fundamentally change the way bows work, and you do need to understand that if you're going to want to get the most out of this. I hear rumours that some things are not working properly. I hear some rumours that things are quite good fun, so we'll see how that goes. I think overall I'm unimpressed with the continuing direction it's going, but what can we say? Anyway, we're also standardising perks and mods that grant the ability to automatically revive. They will now have a 100% chance to occur, but they'll use a cooldown timer. So, if the timer is not active, if it's not on cooldown, it will occur if you get knocked down, but they'll also use an item as well. And in the event of a cooldown, obviously it doesn't work at all. Also, buffs that apply to other players will also apply to yourself when you self-revive. Yeah, so that's not a bad thing, really. It makes it a bit more generalised. Oh, by the way, on the end of this, we've also got a quick look at the changes to the few legendary mods that are adjusting. They're not particularly long list, it's not particularly exciting, but we'll tuck it in on the end rather than doing anything else with it, I think. That's, where else are we going to put it right now? So, let's have a look at these actual changes. Ready? Slugger is now becoming increased damage against crippled enemies. I stand by what I said. Crippled is more effective than it used to be now. You're still better off just doing the damage directly. Just kill the enemy instead of having it crawl towards you slowly. You can do it in the same amount of time, in fact, faster, really, with a better loadout. So, yeah, it's trying to make something that is always going to be a second-class build into something that is better and more effective, but nothing is going to change the fact it's not as good as just taking the enemy out. The only time when it's really effective is when you get the challenge to cripple enemy limbs, and they need to redo the entire challenge system anyway, so this is kind of besides the point, really. Yeah, focus on something else is better. So Slugger Expert is becoming Kneecapper. It's a single rank card with 2 points, and it will increase the amount of limb damage melee weapons do, but won't affect power tools. So no auto-axes, chainsaws, things like that, because, well, they're already extremely high damage. Although it probably also affects drills there, and I don't think drills are particularly effective. A bit wrong on that. Don't think I've seen anybody even consider using one. Anyway, Slugger Master is now becoming Heavy Hitter. It costs 3 points for a single rank, and increases your power attack damage. And again, this doesn't affect power tools because those are always doing power attacks. Every attack with an auto-axe is a power attack. So this would be a flat buff to what is already one of the most powerful weapons in the game. So yeah, leaving that out, good call. So Gladiator, one of the former one-handed perks here, has been changed to be called Wound Salter. And it now increases the amount of damage you do against bleeding enemies. And this is where I'm getting a little frustrated, because I don't particularly want to go into a make enemies bleed thing. I think it still does work on robots and stuff like that, which makes, I was going to say no sense, but I suppose they could leak coolant and oil and things like that instead of bleeding, couldn't they? Yeah. But I feel like if you're going to go for this, bleeding is really the only way you can go. Fire is not really worth it. Poison, mostly not really worth it. I've currently got cryo damage on my plasma cutter, and I don't think there are some things that will buff that, but not anywhere near as much as the other options, and particularly the options around bleeding. So I feel like it's kind of being left behind. Maybe I need to double check on that, but yeah, I'm getting a bad feeling that they're kind of pigeonholing anybody who wants to use a melee weapon into a bleeding build. I could be wrong on that, but that's my instinctive reaction here. Anyway. Gladiator Expert is now becoming Natural Stance. It's a single rank perk that only has 1 point cost, so it's a cheap one. And the reason for that is it's kind of crap. While equipping a melee weapon, reduce incoming stagger. So basically only while you change to a melee weapon. Yeah, so it's very, very situational. It's very, very brief, and it's basically a waste of a point. So don't bother with that. So, Gladiator Master is now Bloodluster, and your bleed effects do more damage and do it more quickly. So 35% more damage, 25% less duration. So, yeah. So your damage over time bleeding is applied faster and to a greater extent. Yeah, again, leaning into that bleeding thing. Okay, Iron Fist. This one's kind of interesting if you want to do a punching power armor build, but less interesting for everything else, I think. That's the vibe I'm getting here. It's a single rank card, and your fist weapons will now do more damage based on your damage reduction. So, yeah. If you've got power armor, therefore the highest damage reduction, then you'll do more damage with your punching weapons. So it really is a punchy power armor dude kind of setup. It'll also tie into Pain Train later on. The two are going to work together. So, yeah, that kind of adds even more credence to that idea, really, doesn't it? Heavy Gunner, this is a massive change. So I mentioned the idea that you'd probably want different loadouts for different jobs. Heavy guns in particular are going to be good for either really large crowds of enemies, which don't happen that often, or single enemies with really big health balls, like, say, the Scorchbeast Queen. Because this is the more bullets you put on target, or the more bullets you fire, rather, the more damage you will do. So, yeah, obviously, if everybody's dying much quicker than that, you're not going to have time for the stacks to build up in order to get the best out of this. So your run and gun, your daily driver is probably not going to be heavy builds anymore, assuming you want to make the most out of it. If you're not bothered about only getting half effects, then as you were, I guess. But, yeah, it feels like this is... The goal here is to make this more situational, I think. Anyway, So yeah, Heavy Gunner is becoming Bulletstorm. Rank 1 will give you 1 stack of Bulletstorm for every 30 ammo spent, up to 10 stacks. So there you go, maximum of 10 stacks, so that's at 300 ammo spent. Yeah, and he lost a place on the list then. Each stack increases your damage output by 3%, and it resets when you reload or change weapons. So there you go. It's going to take a little while to put 300 shots down range, so yeah, if you haven't killed your target by then, it's either because you're firing on a very large group, or you are firing on a very, very durable enemy. My question here is, it doesn't seem to have anything about the stacks wearing off other than when you reload. So the thing here, if that's correct, would be resist the impulse to reload at all costs and drain your magazine entirely if possible. I'm guessing there is a point when the stacks will disappear. It doesn't say there is, but I feel like that would end up happening anyway. Maybe just because you end up changing weapons, maybe because of other reasons, but that is a bit weird. I think maybe if you can hang on to that heavy gun and resist the impulse to reload it, you might be doing okay. Which, to be fair, I did do when I was using Gatling lasers, because then you end up with like half-drained fusion cores cluttering up your inventory, and that was a real pain in the neck. So yeah, it kind of worked well with that particular situation, actually. Yeah. If and when, very big ifs on that point, I were to switch back to using my Gatling laser, because I do kind of miss its fun element. It was quite an entertaining weapon to use. I would probably look at maybe using one of these perks, or several of these perks. So, at ranks 2 and 3, you get a higher amount of damage per stack of Bulletstorm, so 6 or 9% damage buff for each stack instead. So, Bulletstorm grants the ability to gain a stacking buff based on ammo spent. Buff increases damage you deal, and other perks can add additional effects. You can have up to 10 stacks of Bulletstorm at a time. It maxes out at 10, but, caveat to that one, there is actually a way to get past that. You can double it. And they last until you change weapons or reload. Yeah, so you'd really have to resist the impulse to change weapons and reload and things, but I think you could kind of keep it going. So maybe it's not absolutely only useful in that one set of situations, but yeah, if you're not fighting a single target, then building it back up again when you inevitably do have to reload, because it's going to happen sooner or later, will be more difficult to do, I think, as a run and gun build. Anyway, Heavy Gunner Expert is being replaced with the Tightly Wound perk, which at 2-point cost means your weapons will spin up faster, 60% faster, in fact, which is definitely a nice quality of life thing at the very least. The other thing is you get some people who don't have that spin up time in adventure mode who will kind of reduce your ability to contribute to events and things like that because they're just kind of taking things out too quickly. So yeah, spin up's kind of a drag in that regard. You feel like you're not doing anything. When that happens, I tend to just, not bother and just farm off the back of everybody else, because what's the point? But this means you can actually get involved in events and things a little bit more frequently. Feel like you're being left out less because your weapon will spin up much faster. So yeah, that's cool. So Heavy Gunner Master is being replaced with Bringing the Big Guns. This is going to have a 3-point cost, and that's reasonable because it will double the stack limit for Bulletstorm. So looking back at the Bulletstorm perk, you could have 10 stacks for every 30 ammo, doing up to 9% damage buff per stack. This will take you up to 20 stacks, but it's still per 1 stack per 30 ammo down range. So that basically means you will have to fire 600 rounds in order to max it out with this perk on. So bear that in mind depending on the magazine size of your weapon. Assuming you have more than 300 rounds in your magazine, this is still worth having, but you won't only max it out if you've got 600 rounds or more. So yeah, worth knowing that. Lock and Load is a 2-point cost now, and you keep half your Bulletstorm stacks when you reload. This is definitely worth having. It makes that whole thing much more useful and keeps the DPS level up higher. It also increases your reload speed based on the number of stacks of Bulletstorm you actually have. So yeah, that's one you will definitely want, I think, if you're going to go down this road. Bare Arms. I noticed this one is upsetting people, but to be honest, yeah, it doesn't bother me. Previously, Bare Arms reduced the weight of your heavy guns, space in your inventory and all that. And now, each stack of Bulletstorm will increase your bash damage by 5%. Yeah, despite everything they're doing here to increase bash damage across the board, and they have done quite a bit, it's still pointless. It's still a complete waste of perks and stuff that could be definitely better used elsewhere. So I wouldn't bother with bear arms anymore. As for the loss of carry weight, it's an inconvenience, but, you know, manage your inventory. Get rid of some of the stuff you don't need. You don't need thousands and thousands of stim packs in your inventory. You need, like, 20, you know? After that, you know, carry weight's not really the issue that it's made out to be honest. It's easy enough to get around that. Pain Train. This, I mentioned earlier, is going to tie in with the Iron Fist perk, especially if you're going for a power armor punchy build. It is having improved hit detection and a limited hit rate, which is annoying. It just means it will trigger less often, which kind of sucks for it, because I use Pain Train at the moment or I did use, I should say, past tense really, for daily ops when you got the resilient enemies in there and you need to do melee damage. I just run into them to finish them off because it was easier that way, rather than try to bash them all the time, which sucks, especially if you're a heavy gunner, just because it takes so long to do. But since I've moved on to using melee weapons, that's kind of a non-issue, and also I just don't do daily ops anymore because there's nothing to get out of them anymore. But this does generally reduce its effectiveness if it's going to proc less often, especially in that context. So, Pain Train's less appealing, unless you're specifically going for this punchy power armor build, I think, now. Because it counts as a fist weapon now, so all the benefits for increased damage using the Iron Fist perk will also apply to Pain Train as well. And its base damage has been increased, and damage per rank has been increased as well. So yeah, Pain Train's going to do more damage from that perspective. Fewer hits, but more damage when it does hit. Yeah, again, it just changes the use case for it, really, doesn't it? Which is, in particular, taking it out of my usefulness. And then there's the AP cost on the end there as well. We're getting into the bow perks now, and these have all been overhauled a little bit, and they're quite interesting if you sort of know how they're working now, but it does fundamentally change the way they work. They also apply to thrown melee weapons, so throwing knives, cleavers, things like that, but not grenades, so bear that in mind. So bow before me now applies armor penetration and stagger to bows and thrown melee weapons. Archer has been changed to hat trick, and it allows a ricochet effect. So arrows and thrown melee weapons bounce towards an additional target, dealing 70% of their damage. And each rank increases the number of bounces you get. However, each subsequent bounce reduces the damage by 30%. So 70% damage to the second, 40% to the third, and 10% to the fourth. So there you go. So it certainly, if you have this, it would eliminate the usefulness of an instigating bow. So I wouldn't do that myself. If you had an instigating bow and you want to go down that road, but you could definitely build into it other ways, I think, with different legendary effects. Potentially interesting. I still feel like bows are going to be underwhelming to use. They're basically VATS or bust, really, with those. Which is the whole mechanics and the feel and the vibe of them just really isn't that great, which is massive pity, as I've said before, from the development studio that built Skyrim. Anyway, Archer Expert has been replaced with Deal Sealer, which really doesn't roll off the tongue. That has 2 points cost, and there's a single rank card, and you deal 10% extra damage for each impairment your target has, which is to say active effect on the target, so crippled, bleeding, burning, poison, and so on and so forth. Chances are you are not going to be racking these different types of effects up very quickly, though, because weapons tend to only apply 1, maybe 2 at a time of these, which means you'll have to make a shot, particularly as it's a bow as well. You'd have to make a shot, switch to another bow, fire a shot, switch to another one before this really started to do anything. I think this is really kind of crap. Maybe I'm missing something there, but I don't see this being good at all. Cryo is not currently on the list either, although it will be added in a subsequent update. Archer Master, which really feels like it should be Master Archer to me, anyway, is a 3-point cost, and arrows and thrown melee weapons now pierce targets, so they will go through enemies and hit the target behind. And again, this is so situational, I don't feel like it's particularly worth it. It's only going to be applicable if something is standing behind in a straight line and you hit that target. I don't feel like this is particularly useful. I feel like hat trick's probably more useful. And even that's a bit of a mixed bag. Yeah, I don't feel like these are particularly great for bow users, but bows have never been great anyway. Except in a very singular situation, which really wasn't that fun anyway. So, Tank Killer is being tweaked, and now all ranged weapons will ignore a proportion of armor, 20% at rank 1 and 40% at rank 2. So it's just been made more generalized. I thought they'd already done that. Maybe I'm taking that off the PTS. Oh well. Fire in the Hole is getting a new name, Strong Arm, and it will have a single rank, and that is that thrown weapons will fly 50% further. So this applies to grenades and thrown melee weapons as well. Possibly bows too, I don't know. You might want to test that one. It might increase your bow range. I wouldn't be surprised if it did, you know. However, it no longer grants a throwing arc. That is now available to everybody without need for a perk. It is in your settings menu if you want to use it. Homebody has been tweaked. It no longer affects food and drink consumption when you are at a camp. It now improves the benefits of being well rested, and it has had further buffs over its previous adjustments, so that it now adds +2 agility, if you've got a well-rested bonus. Kindred Spirit grants extra perception, Lover's Embrace extra charisma, and it's in addition to the existing benefits. So basically, it's getting a buff, Homebody. Still don't know that that's particularly worthwhile. Again, this is combat for accountants. It's not fun. This is not what video games are about. Ugh, way to miss the point. Stabilize. This is still a good perk if you are a power armor wearing heavy gun user. Big guns gain 30% accuracy, and they gain double that in power armor. So previously it only applied to power armor, I think. Now it applies outside of power armor too, which is still particularly good if you're in power armor. EMT. So we've got EMT here, we've got Injector and Revenant, and all these are buffing the effect of reviving down teammates, and also yourself as well. I do feel like this is primarily useful if you're on a team with a bloodied player, and in that case you shouldn't be taking these perks, you should be leaving them down until they get the message to not play bloodied builds, so you know. So, EMT. 2-point cost, and you automatically revive a down teammate once every 3 minutes and grant them increased healing for a minute, so at least it's not very effective anymore. But it also applies to yourself as well, and you need to be reasonably close by and in the same interior. It won't do it if you're miles apart. Injector. The players you revive have additional AP regen for a minute, and Revenant means they have additional damage output for a minute. But yeah, this is it's so infrequently effective that they are basically a waste of a perk, in my view. Yeah, and the people who are most likely to trigger them shouldn't be playing that build anyway, so yeah. Anyway, moving on. Pointless perks. Healing Hands. Players you revive are fully healed. Oh, that's actually kind of nice. That makes the whole thing potentially useful, but again, that gives a reason for that reduced tick rate on it, the really long cooldown timer. But still, I'm still not impressed with it overall. I think there's probably more useful ways to spend your time, because it's just once every 3 minutes is just not that helpful. Rad Sponge. Speaking of things that are also not going to be all that helpful, it'll have a 2-point cost, but 20% of your rads taken will restore hunger and thirst. Again, better use for the points, I think. I wouldn't pick that unless I had nothing else to spend a couple of spare points on for myself. Ninja has been adjusted so that it now increases sneaker damage with bows and thrown melee weapons as well. Finally, we're on to something that I actually like and approve of. Actually, to be fair, the Bullet Storm I'm okay with as well. Psychopath. This is an important change. It now applies to players who do not use VATs, although it kind of makes you a player who uses VATs at the same time in a way. It has a 2-point cost, and it now means hits outside of VATs will fill your critical meter at 10% contribution, so presumably 10% per hit, which means every 10 hits you'll be able to do a critical without using VATs. That's cool, except that you do have to use VATs, because the only way to trigger a critical is to open up VATs and then trigger it through there. So, keeping with the theme of this update, they got halfway there but didn't finish the job. At least that's the vibe I get. It seems to be the tagline for this update, really. Yeah, if you have to go into VATs to use criticals, then they're still borderline useless to non-VATs using players anyway. What this should do, and I realise this is probably going to be fiendishly difficult to actually implement and nightmare from a bug point of view, is that when you equip this perk, the VATs control the button you press to go into VATs. that should now just trigger your criticals instead of opening up VATs, especially given the way this perk works. So yeah, that's the way I'd do it. Although, as I say, it's probably going to be a can of worms from a bug point of view trying to actually make that work, but still. I feel like it's half a job on that one. But being able to to fill up your critical meter without being in VATs is definitely a very large stride in the right direction, I think. Towards not leaving those of us who can actually shoot straight behind, anyway. Grim Reaper Sprint now is a 2-point cost and a single rank card, and kills in VATs restore AP based on your luck. More luck, more AP restored for kills in VATs. I don't like this one. This is probably my single least favourite change in all of these perks. Bloody mess. In the past, I think going all the way back to Fallout 3, I think, certainly Fallout 4, Bloody Mess was a characterful card. It was a silly card that was mostly about fun. You took it for a boost to your damage, yes, but you also took it for the fun element. Now it is so specific to a single build and a specific use case that it is only really useful in that situation, and the fun element has gone. It is no longer a fun perk to take, it is just a purely numbers-based decision. And dear lord, just call it accountancy simulator and be done with it, for crying out loud. So, it's now a single rank card, which I think it has been for a while, and enemies you kill have a chance to explode based on your luck if they are bleeding. They added damage to the gore explosion that scales with player levels. This explosion does not damage you, the chance to proc increases with luck. So it's more likely to explode the more lucky you are. And it has a small chance to proc without the perk equipped based on your luck. But only if enemies are bleeding, so if you're not using a bleeding effect, this is now completely useless to you. Yeah, thanks Bethesda. Taking a good fun thing and turning it into a fucking numbers game and absolutely ruining it. Stupid decision. Really bad decision. Power Armor Reboot has been made less useful. This is a legendary perk, and you automatically revive using a Stimpak while in Power Armor if you go down. It now is on a cooldown, so rank 1 is 10 minutes, 2 is 8, 3 is 6, and rank 4 is once per 2 minutes. So it aligns with everything else, but it makes the perk much less useful, as it does with actually every other reviving perk as well. So yeah, these are substantially less appealing. They're not terrible, but their place in the priority list is significantly reduced on this because they're now much less useful. The random chance has been removed and a cooldown added. Yeah, exactly. The random chance triggered sufficiently often that it was more often than not, so it was actually more useful. Hack and Slash will now apply damage in a small area, so AoE damage to melee attacks. Up to 60% depending on the ranks you have, this one also being a legendary perk. So tucked on the end for some weird reason, presumably as an afterthought rather than putting it in as alphabetical order, Concentrated Fire is getting a buff for those not using automatic weapons, but the automatic side of things is staying the same. So just a little bit of fine-tuning there. Okay then, so last thing we're going to tuck on the end here, because there really isn't anywhere else to put it, is legendary mods. There are a handful here that are getting a change. Life-saving, as with all of the other reviving perks, are basically being nerfed into oblivion. Chance to auto-revive has been increased from 50 to 100%, but it's now on a 5-minute cooldown that is reduced by 1 minute per additional piece. So unless you really lean into it, this is relatively useless and will only be effective if you've got 5 pieces of life-saving gear on, and then only once a minute anyway. So you could stack with everything else in the fact that it's multiple things that could potentially revive you, but again, way down the priority list, even further than it already was, because it wasn't exactly a high priority anyway. Yeah, there we go. They've renamed Lucky to Lucky Hits. Rejuvenators has got a whole load of stuff on AP, HP. It's dull as hell. I'm not going into that. If you care about that, you can take a look for yourself. Choo Choo's is getting an interesting train though. It's been overhauled to use the Pain Train perk, so you've got an armor set that will lean into that. Again, you really want this on, well, I mean, you would only want this on power armor, I think. I think it probably only applies to power armor, actually. Which is weird, because I've never actually put a legendary effect on power armor, because you don't need to. The game is already farcically easy. Did I mention that? The effect has been overhauled to use the Pain Train perk. Equipment equipped with this. Each item equipped with this mod grants +1 rank to the Pain Train effect, so it can go beyond 3 ranks and works even if you do not have the perk equipped. So the Pain Train perk becomes massively more effective and really leans into that run and punch build with power armor. And there we have it, all the perk card changes in this update. So honestly, the only really good thing that I can say about this, I can't think that there's much. Oh yeah, there's Psychopath giving non-VATS players an opportunity to use criticals. That's nice, but apart from that, I think everything is... yeah, the only good thing I can say apart from that is that this is the last set of changes on this scale we're going to have to deal with for a while. The rest of it is just pretty much crap, really. Yeah, I don't know what they think they're doing with the combat changes in this game at the moment, and I assume this is all geared towards the update that's coming in December, because they're talking about a massive update. And they've also hinted that there might be challenging content planned, and probably therefore included the first part of it in that update. But they're going to screw it up. Based on what they've done so far with it, this is not great. The only challenging content they've added recently thus far has been the raids, which they should never have done anyway, because it excludes a significant part of the player base, so frankly that's just insulting. Yeah, they seem determined to run most of this game into the ground, as far as I can tell. It's awful. I don't know what the hell they think they're doing, but this ain't good. They've got December as a chance to maybe pull it back and claw it, and after that, yeesh. It's, this is a sad sight to see, I think. Anyway, on that joyous note, I hope you found this useful and informative. Hope you managed to get your builds nice and stable going forward. For all the reasons you can probably see throughout the rest of this video, congratulations if you made it this far, by the way. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. There's not a lot of streaming of Fallout going on at the moment, because honestly, I'm just not enjoying it. And I can't imagine why anybody else would either, looking at this crap. So, yeah. If you do want to join us for streams, we're playing other stuff at the moment. Yeah, builds are going to be ongoing, because I am looking forward to diving into the new build system, but... yeah, everything that isn't the new build system just feels like I'm only doing it to support my building, and even then under protest at the moment. So, yeah, it's kind of a sad day for 76 at the moment, I feel. It has steadily been going downhill for a while, and I've been less and less enjoying of playing the game for, well, actually a couple of years now. So we'll see how that pans out, I guess, won't we? Anyway, if you guys are still getting something out of this, you know where the likes and the subs are, I very much appreciate. Social media links in the description if you want to keep up with updates in a reliable way, because the notification bell is not that reliable. And yeah, if you would like to support the channel, I very, very much appreciate it. You'll find the channel memberships down below. Do appreciate. For now, thank you very much for watching. Kudos for making it this far through my frustrated rants. And I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.